Welcome to episode 18 of the Ready for More podcast.
For me, growing your business is really about doubling down on what's working and letting go of what's not. And that's where I see the numbers really coming in, that they tell you what they really help you to work out what is working, where you're getting your traffic from, where people are finding you, getting to know your business better so you know where to focus your efforts.
Welcome to the Ready for More podcast, where we share success strategies and stories for women business owners, entrepreneurs who are ready for more for yourself and for your business. I'm your host, Heather Cameron, and I'm here to help you to discover your unique path to profitability and success so you can achieve your more on your own terms. Are you ready for more? You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. Welcome to the Ready for More podcast. My guest today is Carolyn Wood. Carolyn helps introverted service-based business owners spend more time doing what they love, less time chasing clients for signatures and payments. She specializes in bringing personal touch to the automation and creating quiet business strategies to make any introverted heart sing. Welcome, Caroline. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
And that was kind of a quick introduction about your bio. Can you tell me a bit more about what your current business is and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I have two strands in my business at the moment. One of them is fairly established and the other one I'm just working on developing now. And so the main work I've been doing is helping people set up systems and processes and to a certain extent automating them so that they spend less time doing the admin and the boring stuff in their business and more time actually having conversations that matter with clients and doing work that they love. And then the other part of my business, which I'm really just starting to move towards, is using my accounting skills a bit more, so helping people to understand as well what the stories and numbers are telling them in their business. So I know there's a lot of people out there who hate that.
There is, but it's the one thing they have to know. I have a whole sequence I used to do it's all about the numbers, right? The basic business starts with numbers and ends with numbers. And if you don't know your numbers, then you're truly not on top of your business. So that's a really valuable thing to do. What led you to where you are now? Can you share a bit about your background and how you've kind of evolved to be in that entrepreneurial type role?
Yeah, I think I've sort of wandered around quite a bit through my career. It hasn't been a very smooth, straight line that you sometimes see. And I grew up in Canberra here in Australia, and when I left school, I joined the Air Force, and I did that for a number of years, doing catering and warehousing. And then I went into the public service, as just about everyone here in Canberra does at some point in their lives. And then I realised, the public service and bureaucracy isn't really for me, and I didn't feel I was really contributing, making, adding value to society or my local community. So I actually went into the private sector and trained as an accountant. And as part of that, I moved to the UK for a few years, which was a really wonderful experience. I was born there, but we came out to Australia when I was very young. But all my family except for mum and dad are over there. So that was really lovely to go back and see that, and also get some fantastic skills working for a big accounting firm. But again, still not really meeting those values side of things that, were pressing. So I went and volunteered in Namibia for 18 or 14 months. So working as an accountant for a local charity there, and then came back to Australia. And I've basically been working for charities here and in Southeast Asia since then. I was working for charities, and I like charities, but I really wanted to set off and do something on my own. So that's where I basically landed here. I think part of it's being an introvert. I've never really felt that I quite fitted into that corporate environment. So, and I must admit, I love working for myself. I love the ability that you have to create something that's about you, and to work in an environment that you love, and I love working with small businesses. Just when you work with other solopreneurs, it's really lovely to see how you can support them to actually grow something that makes their life, much more wonderful.
Mm-hmm. You and I are kindred spirits on that. I love the same thing. I also love the very first time I made money on my own. that very first paycheck where this was not paycheck, somebody who paid me for my contract service. It was like, I did this.
Yeah.
I still get a thrill from that. I did this, right? I wasn't paid to do a job. I wasn't hired. I found the job. I did the job. I got the job. I got the work and I delivered. It was like, there's a thrill associated with that I thought was that really spun me on, but I love what you did. For people who are listeners who don't know much about Australia, Canberra, I never pronounced that right. Canberra is the capital of Australia. So in Canada, it's like Ottawa. In the States, it's like Washington. But unlike us, it's kind of off in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of a little city that was set up for just that, wasn't it? I believe. Or
yes. Yeah, but we're not really halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, but the idea was to pick somewhere between the two largest at the time. Yeah.
So that's what we were referring to. And that's why you ended up working in public service. I live in a city that's very similar. So Ottawa is the capital of Canada, and a third of the population here is working for the government, and the other part caters to the people working for the government. So a lot of small businesses here tend to have that element to it, that they have some connection to the government. How's your business evolved? Like, when did you start the business that you're currently in, and how has it evolved?
Probably, it would be about 3 years now. Mm-hmm. But I started off doing Facebook ads management for people. Okay. And I still do a little bit of that, but I think that's one of the mistakes I made in my business when I first started, is I did Facebook ads management for one of the not-for-profits I worked for. Mm-hmm. It's a classic not-for-profit example of, it's small, so you become a jack of all trades because there's no one else to do that work, so you just learn because you have to. And it's a really great experience. And people understand Facebook ads and they pay for it, and it's good money. So I did that and I was making good money, but it's just not something that I love. Marketing is not, I'm good at Facebook ads, but it's not my, zone of genius. It's not what I'm naturally talented at. Mm-hmm. So I guess over the past year now, I've been sort of transitioning out of that into the systems and the numbers work, which I've got much more experience in from my corporate background, and it comes to me much more naturally than the Facebook marketing side of things does.
And I love that. I love that as an example for people listening, is to, if you know what your zone of genius is, then try to work in your zone of genius. And if you don't know what it is, but you know what it isn't, then try not to do the isn't parts. I mean, in my world, I've done that as well, where I had more specifically clients that I realized were not my right clients to work with. So to get rid of them and stay in your zone of genius. And I'm still learning that. I sometimes struggle because I have a techie background. So I get into the techie when that's not really where my zone of genius is. So that one can be a struggle for me. But it happens.
Yeah. And I think with the Facebook ads, it was easy to follow the money. And I think that's another really important thing. Don't do just what people, don't just follow what is easy to get money for, but because I think in the long run you just burn out and you're doing things that you don't enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that trade-off of I think the sweet spot we all want to be in is in the stuff that we enjoy, and we're making money at the stuff that we enjoy.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
That's finding that sweet spot. It's not always easy to find.
No.
But as you work, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen, and many entrepreneurs who listen have seen the success graph to entrepreneurial, where they just put the straight line, and then they saw the real one is this journey that's all wiggle waggle and all over the place. So I've done things in my business where I spent and invested money, and then it didn't end up becoming what I expected it to.
No.
So I mean, that's part of the journey, and I don't find that a failure. It's just a lesson learned.
Yeah.
In all of this stuff. What would you say is the most important thing that you've learned on your journey?
I think it's to listen to my gut, particularly I think around clients who aren't ideal. That if my gut is saying you don't want to work with this person, you don't want to work with that person. And it's really hard when you're first starting out, and you want to get paid, but in the long run, it just is not worth the pain. I think it's really, I think coming from a numbers background, I find it quite hard sometimes to listen to my intuition, but I'm getting better at it, particularly when it comes to who I want to work with.
No, that's a great piece of advice. And I think that a lot of us listen to our intuition in certain circumstances, and then we don't trust our intuition when we enter something new, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely, I agree with you. I have been in business for 15 years. And even less than a year ago, I ended up working for a client I knew I shouldn't have. And it ended badly because I shouldn't have worked for them.
Yeah.
And I did it. And I did it because I was at the time I had a lot of things going on in my life. And it was like, this is somebody I can help. I don't have time to really work it out. I actually tried really hard to not let her hire me. I kept saying, that I'm not really the right person. This is something, no, but she really wanted to. And it lasted for less than a month, I think, and she was demanding a responsiveness that I would never give anyone. She was very millennium based, and let's respond every 20 minutes. And I'm like, no, that's not my business model. So even after 15 years, you can still make that mistake and learn that one again and say, no, it's that. But the cost of it's a lot more. There's an emotional cost, and then there's a reputation cost potentially. And you got to be careful. So the cost of working with someone you don't necessarily think is right isn't always worth the money that you're bringing in.
No, I think most of the time it's not.
An excellent piece of advice. What surprised you the most about being an entrepreneur?
I think for me it has been that people will pay me for my expertise. I think I've really struggled with the fact that just because I find something easy, particularly on the numbers side of things, doesn't mean other people do. I sort of think, oh, that's too simple. No one's going to pay me to do that. But actually, because it's simple for me, doesn't mean it's simple for someone else. And I think that's been a really big learning curve for me, trying to get out of my own head and what I know and not assuming that what I know is what other people know. I think that's been...
It's a very rich piece of advice. There's a couple of layers in that, right? Which is to not undervalue your own area of brilliance, is the words that you used before, right? Just because you love it and you're really good at it, there's a whole bunch of people who aren't. So don't undervalue that, because I see that a lot with women, that they don't price themselves well. They think, oh, anybody could do this, so I'll just charge a bottom dollar for it, when in reality, no, anyone can't do it, number one. And number two, you never should be charging a bottom dollar whether or not you have competition. Competition is a good thing.
Yeah.
If you don't have any competition, then maybe the business you're in doesn't really exist.
Yes.
But I mean, there's oversaturated markets, but there's still competition, and there's that. So that's a big realization. And the second one,
I think it's just, it's, it surprises me what people will pay me to do. Or it did at least when I first started. And now I'm like, oh, that's okay. I am adding value to them, but that's been a real...
Well, because their area of brilliance isn't your area of brilliance.
Yeah.
And I just had a client actually who works in her area that she's working in is personal finance stuff. And she just created this spreadsheet to give to people. And she made these assumptions about their ability to use Excel. And I'm like, just because you're good at Excel, trust me, there's a ton of people who are scared of that product. And I said, you can't make assumptions that, number one, they actually want to use it. Number two, they actually know how to use it. And so she pulled it back and really simplified it. And I'm like, some people are going to take a calculator. And if you make an Excel spreadsheet too complicated, they're going to change something, and all of a sudden it's not going to work, and they have no idea how to fix it. Right. So that brilliance, that even small part of knowing your numbers and knowing how to use the tools out there, is a wonderful tool that so many business owners don't want to touch.
Yeah. It's interesting around those tools as well. I think, because I come from a corporate background, I expect that everyone knows how to use Microsoft Office. Mm-hmm. And so when people start working in Google Docs and stuff, I'm just like, oh, this is this is so not, as can't do what you can do just even in something like Word. I think that corporate background gives you some interesting skills, but also does slant your viewpoint on the world about what you expect something to do.
I'm very, very true, because I also, as we were talking before we got on, I come from a high-tech corporate background. And when I left that and came and my first customers when I started my business were a lot of nonprofits as well. So I did the nonprofits and I did some of that, and the level to which they were able to do some of it started to go down. And you realize I wasn't the techie person in my corporate world, but out of the high-tech world, I am very much on the techie slant. So it's a good piece of advice for listeners not to discount your expertise, and don't assume that everybody knows how to do what you do, because they don't.
Yeah.
Or they don't want to know how to do what you do.
Yeah. And they probably don't need to.
No. No, but in the cases of, I mean, of numbers being, or knowing your numbers, so important to your business.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if we talked about that before the call or already on the call, but knowing that your numbers are really important to your business.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it, then outsource to someone like Caroline who
Yeah.
wants to do it and has fun to do it, right? And I see
Yeah.
many entrepreneurs doing a lot of their bookkeeping themselves and doing a lot of the stuff where they could just give that to someone else,
Yeah.
either VA or someone, and outsource that and really save themselves a lot of time. And then,
Yeah, I think it's the mechanical stuff you definitely outsource, but everyone needs to know whether they're making a profit, what their expenses are. You should be getting great reports from your people so that you can actually use those numbers to make a business decision. You don't need to be doing the collecting and the processing, but you need to be reading the actual finance reports or, your Google Analytics to work out, what is actually working and where you could be saving money, where you could be making more.
And even me, as a techie person, some of what you just said, I'm like, I don't know how to do that one yet. So I'm good with the financial numbers. Google Analytics, not one of my better spots yet. So having people who help you with your numbers and do that. But as an entrepreneur, woman, business owner, you need to be on top of your numbers. And it's interesting because the person's episode who gets released this week, it's pay yourself first. So her comment was, of all the business pieces of advice that she gives, is that you need to know your numbers. And I've met many women entrepreneurs who'll say, my business is doing well. I'm like, are you paying yourself? No.
Yeah.
And I met someone Thursday recently, the same thing. No, I'm not paying myself. So, okay.
It's just like, then you don't have a business if you're not paying yourself.
And that's what they don't realize, right? And they still think they do. And it's a challenge to have that. What's been your biggest challenge with your business? What's as you go from that corporate and that nonprofit, which is a whole different world in itself, to being self-employed, what's been your biggest challenge?
I think for me it's visibility. Mm-hmm. So I am, I'm quite introverted. So I find for me getting out there, particularly on things like video, which I think have a great impact on people and getting to see you and just sharing your message. I think I find that has been the biggest struggle, realizing, making myself go out there and do that, even though it's not something that is naturally comfortable for me. But, if you have a business, you have to be out there and marketing. And particularly, if you have a business like mine where I am pretty much it and I'm the brand, you have to be seen, or else people don't want to work with you.
How have you managed to overcome that? Like, do you find certain media is better for your visibility or more comfortable as an introvert, or how have you been able to?
So I definitely find podcasts more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I think, even as an introvert, I quite like the conversation, whereas if it's a video and I'm talking just into the world, I find that quite challenging to think that I'm actually talking to people. But I think for a lot of it, it's just been, I've set myself, I wouldn't call them goals, but I've said to myself, right, this week you're going to post this many comments or you're going to post this many posts on social media and you're going to pitch yourself, to this many people, and just having those goals. So, when I get to the end of the week, I have to have ticked that box, whether I like it or not.
And that's a number person in you too who likes to see the box ticked, I'm sure. But my podcast this month, Monday, I'm off my days of the week. Today's Tuesday. Monday was about goals and action. So a lot of people set goals, but they don't put action. But what you just said was a really good example of a goal in action, saying you're going to contact X amount of people this week, and you actually have a plan to do that. And that's a really important. This time of year, everybody's talking about goals and setting your plans for 2019. And I'm like, it's just another month. You have to have that plan as an ongoing thing, and goals and action are a really good component.
Yeah.
It's an important part of it.
I think it's been setting aside time to do it as well. So blocking out time on my calendar where I say, right, for this hour, you're going to be visible. You're either going to pitch or, you're going to do a social media post or something like that. So having it on the calendar, otherwise, I can procrastinate with the best of them and it will just not happen at all if I don't have it on the calendar.
Excellent. That's another wonderful piece of advice, which is schedule your rocks and have those things that you don't like to do.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? I think it's a book called Eat Your Frog.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember the exact title of the book. And
something like that.
The same theory is put your biggest, ugliest thing first and get it done with and have it in your calendar so that you do it. Yeah. I do have social media blocks in my calendar for that reason as well, to just get them done, but to keep them contained.
Yeah.
Because they can take over your life if you don't do that. It's a tough one. One of the things that I talk about in my podcast, particularly at the beginning of it, was the shoulds. So I love your view on the shoulds. And what I call the shoulds it's the shoulds that, especially in our conversation as an introvert, you're going to get a lot of shoulds that won't feel well. So how do you manage the shoulds? How do you challenge it when people are telling you should be doing this and you should be doing that, or even more so yourself is telling yourself you should be doing this or you should be doing that?
Yeah, I think and for me, that is where the numbers come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if someone says to me, you should be doing something on, say, Twitter,
mm-hmm.
I might have a little bit of a go at it. But if I'm not enjoying it and I'm not seeing any results, then it goes pretty quickly.
Mm.
For me, with the shoulds, I think a part of it's enjoyment.
And that's good. And that's another element to it. I try to coach people to change the word should to want. Do you want to? And if you do, you want to do it, do you want to do it now, or is it 6 months from now or whatever? But I like your barometer of testing it out and making a decision whether you enjoy it or not, because we are being shoulded to death.
We are, yes.
It's overwhelming sometimes. I don't know what I got recently, and I thought, no, blinders on, because they can really pull you off of what you're actually looking for.
I mean, for me, I think, a should is, it's not a should, I have to be visible, so some shoulds are non-negotiable, and I think it's trying to work out I think a lot of them, there's a high level should, and then it's the strategies underneath that perhaps aren't such big shoulds that you have to do. You have to pick at those bits underneath which should you actually should be doing because you enjoy it, and it fits in with that bigger should.
And that's a wonderful example, because the high level should of visibility is actually getting people to know you and getting your leads. And then the next step is, how do you become visible?
Yeah.
The next step doesn't have to be being on 20 social media platforms. No. And that's where I think people fall, as they go for what's the latest thing. And
yes.
And I also think there's some, depending on who you follow in the online world or even in the offline world, there's people who just love something.
Yeah.
And, I was following someone the other day, and she just pushes everybody to Instagram. And I'm like, yes, someday, but I'm not sure I know how to do it. And I don't want to use time without having a strategy.
Yeah.
It's Instagram. So
yeah,
it's difficult. Is there anything in hindsight you would avoid or have done differently in your business as you came off of that other corporate world?
I think for me, it was definitely that Facebook ad management piece that I should have just not followed the money, and I should have, if I'd stuck with what I'm good at, and I should have done that from the beginning. That's another should. And I think that is a big should, that you, as you said before, you should follow your zone of genius and focus on that and not what is trendy at the time. I think that's the biggest mistake I made, was doing that, following advice perhaps from people I shouldn't have, rather than listening to my own personal preferences and knowing myself better than, giving myself credit for.
That's important, because it is, I think there's nothing wrong with listening to the advice people give you. It's just creating the filter in yourself.
Yeah.
This is right for me, or this is not right for me.
I think that's really hard to do at the beginning.
Yes, because you're ski. There's a lot of insecurities that come when you're starting it out. And I also think it can be hard to do when you pivot. Whatever reason that's causing your pivoting is to figure out how to get back in. I had to take a couple of years away from my business to care for my parents. And so this is my year of coming back into my business. And there was a lot of shoulds, and I'm trying to figure the one that was appropriate or right for me. Podcasting was one of them. Wasn't a should, that was a want. That was one that I really wanted to say, for similar reasons to you. Although I'm an extrovert, not an introvert. I love the medium of podcasting. I think it's a very cool medium to play in and to have and to be able to speak. And I'm dyslexic, so this makes it really easy. I don't have to write. So it has a lot of fun for me in that way. So that's How do you recharge your batteries? Do you work 24 hours a day, or how do you recharge your batteries and keep yourself going for your business?
I found that quite difficult. I think part of the problem I had is I started the business while I was still working. So, that was pretty intense. You're working your 9 to 5 and then trying to do things on weekends and evenings. And I found it really hard to, once I transitioned to the business full time, to say, okay, we're going to get reasonable hours back or else I'm going to burn out. So I found that switching off has been quite difficult, but I find for me, it's reading. And then the big thing I've taken up again is just knitting, because my mind.
I laugh because I just took up knitting as well.
There you go.
To do knitting again about 3 months ago.
Yeah, because I can't meditate. My mind just.
No, neither can I.
I can't slow my mind down enough for meditation, at least not yet. But I find with knitting, I focus on the knitting, so I switch off everything else. And that has just been really good in terms of getting my brain to go, okay, we're not doing business now, we're doing something else. And that's been really, really helpful.
And those sometimes in those moments are when you have the most brilliant business decisions anyways, because your mind's kind of floating. But that's funny because I just started up knitting. I was always been a hobbyist.
Yeah.
My cousin just got me on it. So I'm busy knitting all my Christmas presents at the moment.
There you go.
Trying to get them all finished. But it's just having and knowing that you need something. I mean, I've been lucky because my very, very first corporate job was a killer. Like it was weird shift work where you go to work at 2:00 in the morning and you come out, and it was, so I learned early to set boundaries. So even as a self-employed person, I try not to work. I've never really worked on weekends unless I choose to, or I'm trying to catch up. But I've always set boundaries, which caused me problems with my millennial client who didn't understand that we don't need to work 24 hours a day. And you're not going to get instant response from me. But yeah, knowing that you need time off. And I think I have one client who a couple of clients actually that I've really got to push to say, take time off. Oh, I don't need to. I don't have anything else to do. Well, you will find something else to do if you take the time off. And you're not doing yourself or anyone any favors by working that type of time. So that's a really good piece of advice. What would you give advice to another woman who is ready for more? So they're in business and they are ready and they want to grow it, both from your expertise point of view and from your experience point of view. What advice would you give them?
I think from experience, it's almost just, and it, applies to, so I talk about systems, and for me, systems are all about simplifying your business so that things happen automatically, that you aren't chasing people for things, that, you have questionnaires in place so that you're ready when clients are on the phone, so you're prepared. But for me, it's also about simplifying your business. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before with those shoulds. It's like, if you're spreading yourself thin, I see it so much, people spreading themselves thin, as you say, over so many social media networks. Look at your numbers and see which social media network is working for you and focus on that one social media network and, maybe one other. But really, for me, growing your business is really about doubling down on what's working and letting go of what's not.
Love that.
And that's where I see the numbers really coming in, that they tell you they really help you to work out what is working, where you're getting your traffic from, where people are finding you. And a lot of times it's things like referrals and testimonials, those type of things. So it's about, how do you get much better at asking people for that referral? So, that's what you focus on rather than trying to be on 5 different social media platforms, picking up clients. It's really getting to know your business better so you know where to focus your efforts.
I love that. You have so much depth in what you just said, which is that sense of, it's about, particularly if you're in business because you have a passion for what you do, sometimes you don't actually get to know your business. And I think that statement, which I've never heard it phrased that way, but I love that, is you have to know your business. You have to be the CEO of your business. You have to be the CEO of that, but you also have to know your business. And until you have a CFO, you need to be the chief financial officer of your business as well. Yeah. But a lot of people, because as I said earlier, I did a whole number series on know your numbers and how you can double your income by tweaking everything by 10%. But I'd love to delve down a bit into that comment about know your systems. Because when I say that, and when I hear that, a lot of people go, oh, and they shy away. A lot of women shy away from this. I don't know how to do systems, but you captured very quickly that systems don't have to be complicated.
No.
And they don't have to be some automated process. So can you delve a bit more into what you mean by systems and knowing your systems and how they can help a business?
Yeah, so for me, a system is more just the process you follow, and you have do things the same way every time, so that you're not, I see a lot of people wasting time because they're reinventing the wheel every time they get a new client on. So for me, a system is just like, okay, I've got a new client. There's someone who's interested in working with me. and it's just documenting. That means I need to send out a contract to her. I need to send her an invoice, and then I'm going to send her, say, if you're a web designer, you're going to have a standard questionnaire that you send out to her so that your client, so that you get all the logons that you need and all the information you need in one hit. So you're not keep constantly going back saying, oh, sorry, I forgot to ask you, I also need this. Do you have your branding in place? Yes. If not, then I'm not ready to work with you. You need to go talk to a branding specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having that questionnaire in place so that you're collecting everything you need in one spot, so that when you start, you've got everything you need and you can just get going with what you're really good at, which is designing a website. And, so that's a fairly simple process. And you might, yes, I'd say automate sending out a contract and an invoice and how that questionnaire gets to them. But that's actually very simple to set up. There's a lot of, inexpensive software that's out there now that you can use to put that in place, a very simple workflow. And if you don't want to go through a workflow, on a workflow system, it's even just saying, okay, to send out my contracts, I'm going to use something like, say, HelloSign. And I know I send my invoices using PayPal and I've got a template saved. And then the questionnaire, I've just got something set up in Typeform that is free, and it's about having template emails set up as well, so you're not rewriting every single email. You've got an email that you send out with that questionnaire. You might personalize it slightly. And I think, that's one of the great things about having template emails is that you've got the standard stuff you need to ask already set out. You're not rethinking things. And then you can add that really lovely personal touch, just say that someone has, we were talking earlier about that you've got a standard poodle, just asking a simple question about how your pup is, just adds that personal element and makes clients feel that they've been listened to and appreciated. And you've had the time to think about those questions because the standard email with all the information that you need is written there, sitting there. So you can spend time thinking about your clients and being a real person with them rather than some automated robot that just, okay, what do I have to ask this person on this email? Banging that out. You've got more time to actually think about connecting with people.
And that's a great way for your comment about creating systems and being simplified is a really good way to look at it. Because I had a client, it was actually in the process of launching a very simple program, and she's like, I can't do it because I don't have this and I don't have that. And I went, do you have email? Yes. So do you have a way of receiving money, which in Canada we can do email transfers. We just send an email and there's no banking details. I said, you can do, she said, yeah. I said, so you have everything you need. She's like, okay. Because she was thinking she had to have this complex set of systems because that's what she was being told. That's what she was being shitted about. And it's like, no, you can actually have, the simpler it is, the easier it is anyways for everybody involved. And her next step up may be PayPal, and her next step up may be automation, but it shouldn't stop her.
No. For me, one of the simplest things a person can do is just get in place checklists for some of the key things they do, even just something like, publishing a blog post. It's like, okay, I've written the blog post. I've got the image ready. I've got, an image ready for Pinterest. I'm going to share it on these social networks, and this is the comment I'm going to do with it. Just making sure you ticked all the boxes so that you actually, you spend a lot of time writing a blog post. You want to get the most out of it. So, have a document of where you're going to actually share that post. So you've got a reminder, because it's so easy to forget these things when we've got, so many other crazy stuff going around in our minds with, trying to run a business.
And I would add to that, never underestimate, like, even if you're not a checklist person, which I generally am not, but I actually created a checklist about producing podcasts, because the steps from actually after I hit end and we finish this, the steps to take this raw audio that we have and turn it into a podcast episode, do my blog post, put it all in the right places, create all the images. I actually did create a checklist, which is a new one for me. And it just takes off the pressure. I can sit down and go boom, boom, boom. And then if I want to, it gives me the ability to figure out what I can outsource if I ever wanted to, and what I can automate. Although I have a little hard time trusting some automations. That's a little bit of an effort for me, but to be able to it takes the stress away about worrying about what I didn't remember to do. So it's a great suggestion of just creating a checklist for something that you do frequently, even though it might not be that hard. You're not missing the steps to do that. So that's wonderful. What from that automation point of view and from the numbers point of view, if you had to give some advice about what to focus on, what would you suggest that listeners focus on in their numbers and their area?
So for me, it's always the key number you've got to look at is, are you making a profit?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't do don't look at any other numbers in your business, just look at how much money did I bring in and how much money did I spend on it, and have I made a profit? And if you're not making a profit, then you need to go back and look at, how do I bring in more income, and are there any costs I can cut?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in the first few months of your business you're not going to make a profit because you are investing in some things to get it up and running.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have a client, you're still going to have to pay. You probably have to pay for your website hosting, and maybe you need some help in creating a website, or get a bit of help with your copy if you're new to business. So maybe initially you're not going to make a profit, but once you've got those basic startup costs up and running, if you're not making a profit, then something needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's the biggest thing people should be doing, is knowing what they're spending money on and how they're making money.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. That's an important one, and it's one that sometimes we choose not to look at because we know the numbers are going to be good.
Yeah.
That one where I'll just keep eyeing, I don't have to know, and then I can not pay attention to it. But that doesn't work, because in the end of it,
yeah.
And one of the things I find with a lot of clients on your comment on that is, a lot of them that I meet, women who it's their second career, and they don't always necessarily believe that they're worth making a profit.
Yeah.
I had one client who said, well, I got enough money, I don't really need to make money doing this. I'm like, well, if you're not making money doing this, you're not in business, you're in a hobby. No. And even if you had millions of dollars in the bank, you still deserve to make money and be paid for what you're worth and the value that you're bringing someone. So it's not about the fact that you whether or not you have money to help you. If you're working and you're supplying your expertise in your area of brilliance to people, then you deserve to be paid. Yeah.
And if you want it to be a hobby, if you want it to be a charity, then that's fine, but you need to make that as a conscious decision rather than that you're not worth making money.
Absolutely. And that's a good piece of advice as well, because we're all worth making money.
Yes.
We're all worth, and our worth is high. And I think that's one of the things I find women struggle with, is getting that of translating that to saying, yes, this is worth not just the hours I put into it, but there's a monetary value to it that's even beyond hours. And to be able to, that's a whole other discussion, being able to price based on your value, but just knowing your numbers and not hiding it. I think that's a great piece of advice. It goes with, like I said, the one that comes out this week, which is pay yourself first, and also know your profits and know your numbers. That's when you truly are a business woman, right? You're on top of that, which is really important.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind touching a bit too on that. You talked about knowing your numbers from a visibility point of view, or from an effort point of view. How do you help customers do that? How do you recommend people look at that?
So I do use Google Analytics a bit, which helps you see, what of your content on your website is attracting, what are people watching, what are they engaging with, and that gives you an idea of, which content is resonating with people. But it's also going into things like your Facebook analytics, seeing which posts people are engaging with, which ones they're commenting on, so I think there's there's a lot of pressure put on, well, not pressure, but focus put on, how many followers you have, how much traffic you're getting. But for me, it's all about that. If you're not engaging with people, then it's not really working. The engagement is where the relationships start to develop. That's looking at where people are engaging. But I also like to look at, if they're engaging on a post that actually has nothing to do with your business, and that's all they're engaging with, well, are they ever going to be people who are going to buy from you? So, I know on Instagram, I post pictures of my pups every now and again as part of, being a real person and showing who I am. But if they're the only posts that are getting engagement or, people commenting on, then unless I'm in a dog business, it's really, it's not important really that they're engaging with the wrong stuff. So it's looking at, are they engaging, and then what they're engaging with, and does that actually lead on to people wanting to work with me?
Right.
And so I do that with clients. I look at what content are they engaging with, which messages are really resonating so that they can amplify those messages, particularly if those messages are leading to sales. But if they're not social media comments, social media posts that actually tie into your sales activity, then we probably have a problem that your messaging in terms of your business side of things isn't working. People like you, but that doesn't actually mean they're going to work with you.
And that's there's again a lot of depth in that, which is number one for anybody listening. If you don't have Google Analytics on your website, you should put it on there.
Yeah.
You should talk to your website designer, or even just there's tons of information about how easy that is. It's a plugin on a WordPress site.
Yeah.
It's complicated if you're not a WordPress site, but I'm sure that the wikis and of that all have a way of integrating with Google.
Yeah, I think Squarespace is very similar too.
Yeah. Yeah. So having that is an important step. And the second one is if you have a business page you can look at your insights on your business page. And one of the things I just explained to a customer the other day is that you can go on your business page, you can click on the posts in your sidebar, and then you can see how your posts are behaving, but you can also see when your listener, when your audience is online. So you can actually, or when your posts are being read the most, so you can use all that information to be more strategic. Yeah. So if you don't like numbers, that's fine, but you still should be looking at this stuff to actually build your business and know. I know on my Facebook page, I have it set against people who are similar in my industry.
Yes, same.
See what they're getting for their engagement. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do. And if you don't want to do it, then you call someone like Caroline and you ask somebody to help you figure out your numbers. But the other point you made in that is you don't necessarily need to have a huge following to have a loyal reactive following.
Mm.
And there's you can, when I started business or even halfway 7 years ago, it was all about building your list and making these huge lists, and people were pulling people into their lists and their followers, and their engagement wasn't there. They had a huge list, but there were just a number of people, and they play the games. They play the games of trying to get short number of people. You know, people have these huge lists are only selling to maybe less than 1% of them, 2% of them. I know other people who have really cultivated a really good small list of people who are the right audience, and they sell to 30% of them.
Yeah.
And so, your advice is really good. You don't have to have a huge audience necessarily.
No.
You have to have a responsive, you have to have the right audience.
Yeah. And there's wonderful numbers out there in your email software. If you're using something like MailChimp or ConvertKit, that you can look at and see if people are opening your emails. It's a simple, it's a really easy number to look at. Yeah. And I think one of the things for me is, not getting comparisonitis. So, the industry standard might say, oh, you've got to have a 30% open rate, which is actually probably quite high, and yours is only 25. And for me, it's like, don't worry about the industry standard. How can you move that 25% to 26% and then to 27%? It's all about what you're doing and how you improve, rather than worrying too much about what other people are doing and what the industry says you should be doing.
Yes. And recognize too, because I send out newsletters that are just, here's my podcast episodes, and they get a lower open rate because if they're already subscribing to it, they're not looking at it because they don't need to. But they're not getting an unsubscribe rate. To me, that's a big, if they're unsubscribing or they're complaining, those are the bad ones. But when I send out an email that's off of that, that's more topical, then I get a bigger open rate, and I'm okay with that. I'm not going to stop sending my podcast ones because they're getting opened. I think they're getting like 21% or something like that. 21%, still a good open rate. I think it's, there's X amount of people reading these every time. But knowing that I'm not emotionally hurt when somebody, doesn't open it and the rates are lower than that. And I'm not, like, oh yeah, I got one that's 50%. Yay. Yeah, that's good. But that doesn't mean you're going to be able to recreate that anyways, because the nature of that one, usually those are new announcements or something really kind of thought-provoking, and the next ones go down. I always find it goes like this with that. Same with Facebook posts. So, but those are all really good things of numbers that we should know in our business and understand what we're doing.
For industry, I say not to look at industry standards, but I think particularly for new people, they can actually be really good to look at. Mm-hmm. I've seen people complaining because they're getting a 30 or 40% open rate, and I'm just like, the average for your industry is 15%. You're doing an amazing job, Don't, you're never going to get an 80% open rate on your email list. It just doesn't happen. So in some ways, doing a bit of that comparison can be really useful for people, because I think they set such high expectations for themselves.
And that's there was I don't remember who it was. And one of my previous podcast guests was one of the things that they were is like, you've got to try something. You've got to put it out in the world, but not be attached to the outcome. Be attached to the process of nurturing it.
Yeah.
Which is what you're saying, right? To nurture that and to study it like you would a growing plant or a growing child, which a lot of women have to do, is you're not, when your child is born, maybe some people are, but you're not looking at where they're going to end up. You tweak along the way for them to grow into what they're going to be. And I think that's something as we release new things into the world, or we try something new. And it's been a good one for me because I used to be a bit more too attached to the outcome. And I've just started a Facebook group to go along with this podcast. And I'm not attached to how many people join. Right? It's just, I mean, it joined really well to begin with, but it's going to slow down, and there's going to be, Facebook is weird. It doesn't show things. I've given up on what Facebook does with its algorithms these days. But I'm not, I want it to grow. And I think the value of the people who stick in it and come to it is that audience that you're talking about, where they're responsive. So that's a great piece of advice. We're coming close to the end of our time. Where can people find out more about you? Who are your ideal clients?
Yeah, so they can find me, most of my social handles are @QuietlyCaroline.
Oh, cool.
So it's on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And then my website is just carolinemwood.com, because with the last name of Wood, it's very hard to get a website with your name. So the middle initial comes into play. And so my ideal client, working with service-based entrepreneurs who probably been in business for a year or two and are finding that actually things aren't quite working how they want, or they're spending so many hours on their business that they created so that they'd have freedom in their life, and actually their business is eating their life, basically, taking over their life. And I do primarily, or not primarily, but my focus is on working with introverts, just because I'm an introvert, and I think I bring that experience to the work I do, and that understanding of, they don't want to do perhaps more extroverted things. So we really focus on the systems and the numbers so that the business supports them as an introvert, rather than, feeling that they have to do all these things, because it's what extroverted people have told them they need to do for a successful business, but it doesn't work with their personality. Although I do find that a lot of what I recommend for introverts, still applies to extroverts,
Absolutely. I mean, we do approach things differently, but we still all have to do basic things in our life and business. So that's great. I will put all of those in the show notes. So I'll put your website and all your handles in the show notes so that people can find you that way. I always wrap up with 3 questions. The first one is, what do you think your superpower is?
I think we've talked about it a lot. My superpower is understanding numbers and being able to see the stories that they're telling people.
Love that.
It's taken me quite a while to realise that is my superpower, but I have, and just stepping into it feels really lovely.
And I love the way you put it, because I do think numbers tell a story.
Yeah.
And they're not, and that's something I see a lot of women are blinded to, that story their numbers are going to tell them, good or bad.
Yeah.
They're telling you a story. They're not criticizing you. They're giving you a piece of information that you can use to move your business forward. So embracing them is great. What's your favorite quote? Do you have a favorite quote?
I do. It's, what if I fail? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? I think it's Erin Hansen. And I'm naturally a worrier. So for me, it's a constant reminder that by taking risks, you might actually achieve amazing things. That, you aren't automatically going to fail just because you try something new, that, something wonderful could come out of it. So I think it's, for me as a worrier, and it's a really good reminder that there is good stuff out there to be seen.
Good one for me, in that it's that push. I get 99% done, and then I'm scared to push the baby out the door. Not the baby, but the product out the door, or the service out the door. So yes, I love that one. What's the most important message you'd like to leave our listeners?
For me, it's that you shouldn't be afraid of your numbers, that you need to come to grips with them if you're going to be serious about your business, that you have to understand the numbers. And yes, you can outsource a lot of that work, but the key numbers you as a business owner need to understand to really step up into a role of being a CEO.
I love that. I always tell people not to outsource their voice. And not to outsource the decision making of your numbers is an add-on to that, because I think that's very
Yeah.
good. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your
Thank you for
expertise.
having me.
You're welcome.
It was really lovely to chat.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ready for More podcast. You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. My name is Heather Cameron. I'm your podcast host. And when I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm busy working with entrepreneurial women like you who are ready for more in their business and are looking to get focused on their own unique path to success. You can find more about myself and my programs at www.igniteyourmarket.com. If you like what you heard, feel free to rate, review, and share with your friends. And don't miss an episode by subscribing. Until next time, remember, now is the best time to focus on your more and be inspired by your own unique gifts.